this is going to be an interactive time together. So pen and paper, you want to be able to take notes, or iPad, or however it is that you record it, because you don't want to just listen. You want to be doing the work here, because it's a book called How to Begin. So you don't want to just be thinking about it. I want to get you actually going. And look, at the heart of this book is a fundamental belief. And because you're creators, I want to tell you the quick story about how this book came to be. I had this idea after I wrote The Advice Trap. I'm like, you know what? I haven't quite cracked the whole idea of behavior change yet. I want to go deeper. I want to know, why is it so hard for us human beings to shift our behavior when we want to, when we need to, but somehow we get in our own way? I'm like, there's more work to be done there. So I started writing a new book. And, after 80 pages or so, I went, okay, I've got a first draft, and I sent it out to a few close friends saying, look, give me some feedback. Tell me how I'm doing. Tell me all the good stuff. And after 2 days, my friend Misha wrote back to me and went, look, I'm 50 pages into reading your book. I have no idea what it's about. It's a bit crap, isn't it? I was like, oh man, you know what? No. That would be harsher if it wasn't true. And I was like, I could feel the truth of it. And you know that when you're building and you're creating, the first draft is always a little bit crap. And even when you're experienced at it, and I've now written 6 or 7 books, I still write a crappy first draft of a book. And I need people to tell me that, because I'm also deluded. So I was like, this time I've cracked it. This time I've written an awesome first draft. I'm like, no. But anyway, I was kind of picking through the rubble of the first draft, and there was not much I wanted to keep, but one phrase, actually a sentence I wrote, stood out, and I'm like, that feels like the essence of what I'm trying to say, the essence of what I'm trying to talk about here. And this is it. We unlock our greatness by working on the hard stuff. So I'm like, I've got a deep purpose. This is why I write books on coaching, which is to unlock people's greatness, to unlock the best of them. I think coaching is one of the technologies you can use to bring forth people's potential and bring forth the very best of who they can be. But it's not just about the questions. It's about finding the right work that opens you up, that demands the best of you, that speaks to the best of who you are now and the best of who you can be. So at the heart of this book is a call for you and others to be ambitious. I want you to be ambitious, not just for yourself, but for the world. And at the heart of this is this idea of, how do you set worthy goals? Because this is what this book has ended up standing on, which is like, how do you find a goal that is worthy? And by worthy, I don't mean on some sort of moral pedestal, but I mean worthy of you and your life. How do you find a goal that speaks to all of who you are? And just like one of the reasons I wrote a book on coaching is like, you know what, I'm underwhelmed by how coaching is explained and taught and made accessible for people. So part of what the Advice Trap and the Coaching Habit are about is unweirding coaching, so that everybody can pick it up and go, oh, if that's what coaching is, I'm up for that. I can do that. I can do that with my team, or with my kids, or with my peers, or with my company. I get that. I want to do the same for goal setting, because honestly, the goal setting model that almost everybody knows is setting SMART goals. And when you look at SMART goals, what you find is SMART is an acronym for tightening it up, lowering it, making it shaped more specific, more tighter, more measurable. And the problem with that, if you'll pardon my French, is you can end up with a SMART goal that's a little bit like polishing a turd. It's like, it doesn't matter how smart it is if you haven't got the right goal. And I want you to be thinking about, what's the goal that really matters to you, that you're going to put time and attention and resource, passion and courage into, so you can make a difference for you and for the world. So that's what we're going to be covering in the time together. I'm going to show you how to think about and draft a worthy goal. But before we go there, before we get into the work, I've got a couple of questions. And for those of you who are live with me, I want to see you to put this in the chat. And those of you who are listening, you can write this down in your journal or wherever you're taking notes. The first question is this. On a score of 1 to 7, 1 being low, 7 being high, how deep do you want to go with me today? How deep do you want to go? 1 is, look, I'm a surfer sort of person. I don't want to go anywhere. I like the light. I like staying safe. I like not thinking too hard. So I'm just going to take it easy. 7 is like, oh, I'm I'm going to take the plunge. I want to explore the depths. I want to explore the shadows. I want to go out to the edge. And look, there's no problem. There's no guilt in having a number that's not a 7, because sometimes it sounds like I'm bullying you into writing down 7. And there's a ton of 7s coming through in the chat, which is nice to see. But really, I want you to be thinking about, what are you up to for right now? Like Kerry's coming in with a 5, and that's brilliant, because Kerry's like, I think I know what I'm up for right now. It's 5 out of 7 in terms of how deep I want to go. Perfect answer. There's no wrong answer to this. Although I have to say, Ankit's answer to infinity and beyond is a particularly good answer. Somebody once said that I was the bastard child of Mr. Incredible and Fozzie Bear from the Muppets. And that's pretty accurate, actually. It's like 96% Fozzie Bear, 4% Mr. Incredible. That's about the right mix for me. So I love the shout out to the Incredibles there, Ankit. The second question I've got for you, 1 to 7 again, 1 low, 7 high, is how much risk are you willing to take? How much risk are you willing to take with me? Because this is about you perhaps showing something, revealing something, sharing something that you might not otherwise take. And you get a choice as to how vulnerable you want to be. 1, not vulnerable at all, don't want to try anything new, think anything new, share anything new. 7 is perhaps you've got some poor personal boundaries. You're like, okay, I'm going to share that upsetting incident from my childhood that still makes me cry. And when the naked thing happens, you're going to be the first to be getting your clothes off. That's what a 7 might be. So Nino's at 77,777,000 or something. So I appreciate that you're all in on this, and Nino would get naked. I know what Nino looks like naked. And so for that reason, I'm going to take the naked bit out of this workshop, because that's probably not what we want. Hey, Chris, let me check in with you as my kind of co-host and conspirator here. How did you check in on those 2 questions? How deep and how much risk?
I wrote 7, and I wrote 7 until you mentioned the naked part, and I scratched it out and I put that 6. I'm not ready to go full Monty yet.
That's probably a benefit to all of us in the long run.
For sure. You've seen me naked too.
I love you showing up. And like I say, any choice you make is a good choice. It's just about getting your head in the game. And by the way, if any of you run webinars or you teach or you do things like this, as a discipline, I always invite my audience to check in with what they're up for at the start of it, because most people are showing up like you, where you're like, you know what, I showed up because it was in the calendar and I'm quite interested in this, but I haven't really got my head in the game as to what I'm thinking about or how I want to show up. I'm mostly we show up to these in a little bit of kind of passive recipient mode. And you can see how my questions are actually making you think about how you want to show up and how you want to engage and how you want to be active. So if you're a teacher in whatever format, you might want to steal some version of those questions. I often ask, how active and engaged do you plan to be? How much risk do you want to take? It's one I love, and you heard me ask. How much do you care about the experience of the other people in the event with you? And what do you want? Those are other questions that I sometimes ask at the start of an event. So if any of that's useful, steal away. If none of that's useful, we'll move on. So I want you to find a worthy goal. And my goal today is to get you some way down the path towards drafting a worthy goal. And you've heard me, whinging about SMART goals and how I don't really rate them as a particularly useful thing, or at least they're useful in their place, but they're not a great place to start when you're thinking about setting a goal. So let's get into a worthy goal. And a worthy goal has 3 elements to it. A worthy goal needs to be thrilling and important and daunting. So let me ask you this in the chat. When I say that a worthy goal needs to be thrilling, what do you think I'm talking about? What does that bring up for you? And Chris, let me put you on the spot while people are filling in their answers. What does thrilling bring up for you in terms of an idea?
I think it needs to be something that scares me, that puts my stomach or whatever in my throat. So for us, it's like making the kind of change that we don't think is quite possible yet, but we wanted to dare to do it.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. So some of the nice stuff coming through in the chat makes you exciting, visceral. I want to do it. Makes your heart pump. A little nervous. So there's a bit of that dauntingness coming through. Tiffany's saying rousing, and I love rousing. That's a really, really terrific word. Yeah, for me, thrilling is about, it lights you up. It's what you care about. It's what you're up for. It makes you rub your hands and go, oh, yeah, this. Thrilling speaks to my values, my interests, my passion, my sense of myself now, the person who I want to be when I grow up. Thrilling is all about you. And the power of thrilling, it's delightfully selfish because it's just about what you care about. It's just what will get you going. And in doing so, it makes it a counteraction to the sense of obligation that we sometimes kind of inherit. Sometimes that sense of obligation comes from inside us. Sometimes it comes from outside us. But quite often there's this like, well, I ought to, I should be, at this stage, it's probably appropriate that and we can kind of inherit these things that can be a little much. And thrilling at this stage is just all about you. So thrilling is great. But if your goal is just thrilling, if it's just about you, then it's limited because it's just about what you want in your life. And I want it to be more than that. So I'm looking for you to have a goal that is not only thrilling, but also important. And the power of important comes, it's best expressed from a writer who I love. Her name is Jacqueline Novogratz. She wrote a book called A Manifesto for a Moral Revolution. And she runs a very cool company. I think it's called Acumen. And it's effectively a venture capitalist for nonprofits. So, and she's got a TED Talk on this. So if you hunt her down and find her most recent TED Talk, you can get the 18-minute version of this idea. She has a statement in that book and in that TED Talk, which I think is at the heart of what important is. And it's this: can you give more to the world than you take? Can you give more to the world than you take? And yeah, Richard's saying it reminds you of JFK's ask not what you can do for your country, but what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So nice link there, Richard. So, in your personal stuff, it's around how do you give more to the world than you take? If you're thinking of a worthy goal in your work setting, you're then thinking about how does this fit to the big picture? How does this fit to the strategy? How does this align to the bigger goal of we're trying to achieve as an organization? How do I fit that in? So it's a call to be more strategic. And the power of important as one of the three elements of the worthy goal is it's a counteraction against overly self-centered. When I look at the worst of the self-help world and the kind of prosperity world, it's kind of all about me. How do I get a bigger car and a bigger house and a bigger this and a bigger that and more bling and all of that stuff? And I'm like, look, there's a great case to be made for individual prosperity. But if that's all it is, that's way less interesting to me because, man, this world needs people like you taking on worthy goals. So all of our world gets a little bit better. So thrilling, lights you up, important, gives more to the world than it takes. The third element, and really, I think, Chris, you were really touching on this as well when you were talking, is it needs to be daunting. It needs to have you, I think I saw somebody in the comments say, a little bead of sweat the back of your neck. And yeah, I want you to have sweaty palms as you think about this. Another writer who I love, her name is Liz Wiseman. She's best known for a book called Multipliers, but she has a brand new book out that I can recommend called Impact Players. She says, when we were talking about this, she said, like, daunting is when you know how to start, but you don't really know how you'd finish. I think that's a pretty good way of putting it, which is like, oh yeah, I feel like I could take the first few steps into this, but how it plays out, I don't know. How does that work? Now, here's what I would say, because I get asked this a lot. What if you just got 2 out of 3? Is that good enough? And I'm like, look, it won't be bad, but really the best worthy goals have as good a mix between thrilling and important and daunting as you can pull off. If it is thrilling and important, but not daunting, it means that you've hit a plateau. It means that you're no longer really growing and learning. And so that it's exciting for you and it's serving a purpose, but you've stopped growing. And thrilling, important, but not daunting means that you've hit a plateau. You're no longer growing. And why I do this work is I want to unlock your greatness. And if you don't have daunting, you're not going to be unlocking your greatness. If it's thrilling and daunting, but not important, then sure, you'll grow, sure, you'll get nourished by it, but you don't make our world better. So it's a little self-centered. And I need our world to be better. Like, I'm worried about it. I need people taking on bigger things than that. So I want you to think bigger than just what can I get out of this? And if it is what's left, important and daunting, but not thrilling, you lose the internal motivation, the internal driver to actually get this stuff done. Because in some ways, thrilling gives you internal motivation, important gives you external motivation, and daunting provides the engine of personal growth. And that's why these three things are such a strong combination when you weave them together. Now, some of you, as I talk about this, some of you have gone, oh, this is helpful because I kind of know what my worthy goal is. And this is helpful kind of refining it a bit, but I've kind of got a sense of what I might put my time and attention to. And some of you are like going, I don't know, it sounds good, but where do I even start with this, Michael? I mean, it's a big thing and I want a worthy goal, but where do I look? So for all of you who are thinking to yourself, where do I look? Let me give you three quick lenses, and then we're going to get into actually having a drafting a worthy goal. So I think there are these three different places that you might choose to look, three different types of lenses that you can put up to the world, which might uncover opportunities for you. And the first one is a really simple division, two spheres. There's work and there's not work. Now, I don't love this division just as a kind of design thing, honestly, because it makes it sound like work is everything and then there's whatever's left over is the not work. And I don't really think that's how life goes. But you get how that's a practical division. It's like work, not work. That's kind of clear and clean for me. So you'd be choosing to go like, okay, the way I make a living, the organization I'm connected to, maybe my worthy goal can be found there. And often that's where I go to because I get a lot of meaning from my work. So often I'm defining my worthy goals in terms of, the projects that I've got coming up. But maybe it's outside work. Maybe you're like, you know what, there's a place for me to look outside work. And we'll get into that in just a minute. The second lens that you can be thinking about, and this is a really important one, is the scale at which you're choosing to play. And I think the scale can go from narrow to broad. Or maybe a better word here is not narrow, but intimate. Because one of the things that people sometimes assume about worthy goals is that if it's not kind of earth-shaking, it's not really worthy. If you're not liberating a country or leading a movement or initiating a revolution, it doesn't count. And I don't believe that for a moment. I think there are thousands and millions, in fact, of worthy goals that can happen at a really intimate scale. It's just about where you're putting your focus and where you want to make a difference. So to give you a sense of how you can combine context, the two spheres, and scale together, if you're thinking about non-work, got it on this side, on this side, I think the most intimate unit you could probably work at is your family. And you can be thinking to yourself, my worthy goal is to be a better parent or a better partner or a better son or a better stepson or something about the relationship and about how you're working that family together. Maybe you're thinking about your community. And of course, your community can be your online community, just like the Futur here is an online community. Maybe it's a local community. So I might be looking out my window and going, it's my small part of Toronto. It's Roncesvalles. Maybe that's my community. Or maybe it's my street, Marion Street. Maybe that's my community. Or maybe it's Toronto, or maybe it's Canada. So you can be focused on a geographic focus for your community. Or maybe, and this will ring true for some of you, and it rings true for me as well, maybe you're thinking about your audience. If you're a creator, you're thinking about how do I serve the people who listen to my podcast or who buy my art or who buy my books? How do I bring them together and create a worthy goal around the people who I want to understand and celebrate and consume the stuff that I put out into the world? And then maybe at the broader scale is like you channel your inner Greta and you kind of think about what's a movement? What does that look like? And then in work, I think the corresponding ones are like your team. You could be thinking about how do I build a team that's extraordinary? How's my worthy goal connected to my team? Or your business unit if you work in a bigger organization. And business unit, here you're often thinking about your customers or your clients as well. Maybe it's something about your organization. There's a worthy goal connected to culture or a worthy goal connected to strategy. Or maybe it's about how your organization meets the world and serves the world. Honestly, I'd love somebody at Facebook to take that conversation on and be thinking about that. So context and scale and how that combines. And then there's a third lens, because hopefully you found something or you got some inkling of what might be there. I think there's almost like 3 doorways you can kind of walk through. One is the project, the work that needs to be done. One is the people, and then there are patterns. So project is about what's the work that needs to be done. It's the literal or the digital dust, dirt under the fingernails. It's like what gets started or launched or begun or shut down or continued. Then there's the people side. So you may put more emphasis on the relationship that's being happening. You strengthen the relationship between a person and you and that other person, and that can happen in any project. Or maybe it's about patterns, and patterns are your patterns. It's like, how do you get in your own way? How do you rise above old ways of working that are no longer serving you? All right, there's a lot coming at you, so I appreciate that. Before I get us into thinking about what writing a draft might look like, and I'm such a fan of writing drafts, in the chat, tell me what's been most useful or most valuable for you so far. What's landed? And while you're putting that into the chat, I'm going to check in with Chris and ask him the same question. Chris, for you, what's been most useful or most valuable? And of course, those of you who've read The Coaching Habit, and I saw a bunch of you hold that up, this question. It's the last question in the book. So I'm practicing what I preach here. Chris.
Very good, Michael. I think the most useful thing for me thus far is thinking about my goals in these 3 lenses: the thrilling part, the important part, and the daunting part. I think it's a pretty potent combination of how you can find that sweet spot in the middle. Not easy to do, but that's why it's a worthy goal.
That's right. Lovely. That's great, Chris. Thank you. And lots of people are kind of agreeing with you. Lots of people going, look, it's helpful to have the 3 different elements. Andreas, I think it said they like the differentiation between worthy and smart. Ali is going, look, the daunting is really striking a chord for me. Brian's liking that we unlock our greatness by working on the hard stuff. Thank you, Brian. I like that quote too. Feel free to tweet it out, because I thought it was the only thing that was worth rescuing from that first draft, but I'm glad I saved it. And the scale for Matthew was helpful. I got an email from somebody yesterday, actually, Jay Clowes, who runs a podcast some of you might know. I think it's called The Creative Element. So it probably is a helpful podcast for many of you to listen to. And he and I had talked about the book, and he wrote to me saying, that has really resonated, and I realized that too many of my goals aren't important. They're about revenue targets or whatever it might be. And actually the important thing becomes the way for me to actually enroll more people to the work that I'm doing, to find a cause. It has more people go, look, I want to be part of that with you. So lovely. Great stuff coming through the chat. If you're listening to the recording, maybe if you're listening to this on YouTube, maybe you want to put some answers into the comments on YouTube as well, because we love to see that activity as a community, wherever you're listening to me and Chris have this conversation. All right, folks, enough of me blathering on for a bit. I'm going to get you to do a little bit of work here. Here's the challenge. I want you to write your worthy goal, but let me be specific. I want you to write a crappy first draft of a worthy goal. And I am insisting that it is a crappy first draft. None of your highly polished, this is the perfect answer, I'm going to make it just so. It's got to be suck a bit. It's got to be a bit underwhelming. It's got to be a bit mediocre. I want you to get something down. And even if you're like, look, Michael, I barely know what I'm grasping at. I'm like, perfect. Get something down, because there is power in actually seeing something drafted. It is a crappy first draft, so there's no obligation to do it. There's no obligation for this to be articulate. There's no obligation for this to be perfect. It is write a crappy first draft and see how that goes. It can be a sentence. It can be 2 sentences. Probably don't want it to be too much more than a couple of sentences long, because then it's more like a manifesto than a crappy first draft. And then if you're feeling brave and you have full permission not to do this, this is only if you're up for it. If you want to share your crappy first draft in the chat, there's an invitation to do that. And remember, I did ask you how much risk are you willing to take? And there's a whole bunch of you going, I'm coming in hard at 7. So if you want to rethink that, that's fine as well. But, part of it is, we've got a lot of smart people here. We've got an active community. It's pretty cool to see what people might be thinking as thrilling and important and daunting for them right now. And Stefano leads us off. So thank you, Stefano. Travel the world and helping people on the way. I love that. Dennis helping 1,000 automotive businesses make $1 million each. That's great. I love how tangible that is as well. Ian's putting an age to ageism. So already we're starting to see this kind of really different focuses and different levels of specificity as well in the worthy drafts. So lots of good stuff coming through here. I really like it. The purpose of doing a first draft, and as people kind of connected to the creative world, this, is so that you've got something to work with as you move to the second draft. And I want to show you how to think about and move to the second draft in a minute. But Chris, let me ask you 2 questions.
Yes, sir.
Would you like to share your crappy first draft with full permission not to do that? Great. How would you share it? What does it sound like?
Yes, I just wrote it down. So my crappy first draft is to teach people how to find their voice and tell powerful stories that resonate with others.
Very nice. I love that. What, if anything, was helpful or useful for you in writing that down?
I had to think about not just what I wanted, but how I can give more than I take. And then also to include an element that would be scary. Like, I think the thing that you said about, we know how to start, we just don't know how to finish. And I think this fits that model so far.
That's really nice. I mean, I'm looking at Mary-Ann, and her first draft is to get her pod into every hospital in Canada and the US. And actually, in the book, I tell 2 stories of me going through the process myself. So I kind of show my working as I go through this. And I have 2 stories that I tell. One is what it took for me to stop being the CEO at Box of Crayons, to give that up to somebody else to run the company, and to try and think of my next big project after I left Box of Crayons. But the other one was about launching a podcast. So Miriam's comment has made me think about that. And actually, when I wrote my first draft, which was to launch an awesome podcast, it really wasn't that thrilling or important or daunting for me, because I'd done podcasts before. So the idea of getting a microphone and recording it and asking people to be interviewed, I kind of done that. So it wasn't that daunting. And I didn't really have an idea for what the podcast was, so it wasn't really important. And I was like, it's kind of thrilling, but I don't know why it's thrilling yet. And actually, it was through the iterations of it, which I'll share as we go through this, that it started turning up the heat. And I actually I articulated a final worthy goal that was like, oh yeah, that is thrilling and important and daunting for me. So if you're looking at your worthy goal at the moment and you're like, it's okay, but it's not really there yet, I'm like, exactly. Crappy first draft, celebrating crappy first drafts. What we're going to do is we're going to hold your first draft up to 3 tests. We're going to test each one of the 3 elements. And we're going to test it not in a way that's designed to make you feel bad or beat yourself up or guilty or less than in some ways. It's just to poke this draft and see where the weak spots are and how you might amp it up a little bit to prepare you to write a second draft, which is the exercise we're going to get to in just a bit. So the 3 tests I've got for you are the spouse-ish test. That's going to be good for thrilling. The FOSO test. That's going to be good for important. And the Goldilocks zone test, which is going to be great for daunting. So let me take you through these 3 tests. As I'm explaining to them, you can kind of start making some notes and applying them to your worthy goal and see how you do against it. So the spouse-ish test. If you're lucky, you have somebody in your life who really knows you and really gets you. And for some of us, that's our spouse. Like it is in my case, I've been married close to 30 years now. So Marcella is a person who I like and she likes me, and somebody whose taste and opinion I can trust, and who also has no holds barred about kind of holding back on stuff. So I hope there's somebody a bit like that for you in your life. Now, it might be a spouse, but for many of us, it's not. Some of us don't have spouses. Some of us don't like our spouse that much. So it might be a best friend or a mastermind group or somebody in this community, but somebody who gets you, understands what you're up for, still laugh at some of your jokes. I mean, obviously not all of them, but some of them. And kind of who's in your corner, who you can kind of lean into and kind of trust. What I want you to imagine is that you are sharing your crappy first draft with that person. And you can either do this as a thought experiment, or you might do it as a real experiment. And if you shared that first draft with that person, I reckon you get one of three different responses. Sometimes what you get is them going, oh, yes, 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 that's the thing for you to be doing. I love that. I can't believe we hadn't thought of that beforehand. You should definitely do that. This sounds perfect for you. Get that real surge of enthusiasm. It's lovely, right? You're like, oh, and I'm excited now because they've got my back on this. There's a wind in my sail. Sometimes you get something like this, and I've heard all three of these from Marcella. Sometimes you get, well, yes, but honestly, could you stop talking about it? Because you've been talking about this now for 5 years or 10 years or however long. I'm bored. I'm bored of you talking about it. Just stop the talking and get on with it. So it's kind of like yes with an asterisk, which is like, yes, but please, enough of the chit chat. Just start doing it, for God's sakes. And sometimes you get no. Why would you do that? That's a terrible idea. Absolutely not. This is not the worthy goal you are looking for. Step away from this worthy goal. And like I say, I've heard all three from Marcella. The most infamous in our house is that when I told Marcella that I was going to write The Coaching Habit, she's like, absolutely not. That is a terrible idea. You should definitely not do that. For one thing, you're so far behind on all your emails and obligations. Like, you owe me alone 10 different emails. Do not write this book. And I was like, I'm definitely writing this book. This is going to be good. Which turned out to be a really good decision. So what you need to know with the spouse's test, a key insight here is their answer isn't the truth. Their answer is just a sounding, just feedback, just a way for you to triangulate and kind of help you understand how you feel about this worthy goal. Maybe shed some light on the weight and the value of this worthy goal. So that's the first test, the spouse-ish test. Imagine whoever that person is, that person who has trusted truth for you, what feedback might they give you on your worthy goal? The second, and that's good for thrilling in particular, I think. It kind of like it speaks to, yeah, this is a good fit for you. The second test is the FOSO test. Now, FOSO isn't a variation of FOMO, and FOSO isn't a funky district just uncovered in downtown New York. FOSO stands for the sake of. So the question I've got for you now is, like, as you look at your worthy goal, however you've written it, if I was to ask you, well, for the sake of what are you doing this? I'd be curious to know what your answer is. And then if I said, okay, that's a good answer, and for the sake of what are you doing that? There's a way that you get to examine this, to go, do I have a real clarity about the importance of this, how this serves the bigger game, how it makes the connection to the strategy, or it gives more to the world than it takes? So FOSO is very much a way where you test the bigger picture. And I think the way you answer it is like, as you hold up between FOSO, you can go for the sake of what? And Anna Maku has asked a very good question, which is like, well, what's the difference between FOSO and why? Because many of you will know the ladder of inference, which is like, ask, well, why are you doing this? And they give you an answer. And then you go, well, why are you doing that? And they give you an answer and they go, why are you doing that? Well, because why is a very tricky question to ask, because it's actually pretty tricky to ask why in a way that doesn't sound like, why the hell are you doing this? It comes with some weight and some judgment to it. Asking why often triggers a sense of defensiveness. And for the sake of is just a gentle way to kind of get to the same thing, which is like, oh, what's at the heart of this? For the sake of what are you doing this? So, and a great question. And then the third test So we've done spouse-ish and we've done FOSO. The third test is the Goldilocks zone. So in astronomy, there's a lot of excitement at the moment in looking for exoplanets. So exoplanets are other planets that circle other stars other than our star. And in fact, just in the last few months, they've discovered the first exoplanet outside our own galaxy. Super exciting. It's like 123 million light years away. They've somehow got the equipment that can see a planet that far away. And not only are astronomers interested in planets, but they're interested in planets in what they call the Goldilocks zone. And the Goldilocks zone is that area in space that is neither too close to the sun or the star and not too far away from the star, but in just the right place where water is liquid. Because where water is liquid, there's a possibility for life. Too close and the water boils off, too far away, it freezes. But liquid water gets people really excited. So the Goldilocks zone is about having the right weight, the right heft, the right kind of oomph to whatever it is the worthy goal that you've decided for yourself. And often we either go too small, we kind of undersell ourselves, we undersell our ambition, or honestly, we go too big and too vague, and it all gets a bit too much and it's overwhelming. And really the question you want to ask yourself is, does this feel like it's got the right heft? Big enough to be meaningful, but not too small to be kind of tiny, but not too overwhelming, not too hot, not too cold, not too whatever. It's like, does this have the right heft? So those are your 3 tests to hold up against your worthy goal. Let me ask you this. Yeah. Of those 3 tests, which test feels most useful for you right now? Which one really feels like it's landed for you? So Goldilocks, the last one, the spouse-ish, FOSO. So yeah, it's an interesting mix already. Chris, let me check in with you while people are putting their answers in. Which of the 3 tests felt most rich for you?
I like the Goldilocks test, Michael.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like I need to find something that's going to challenge me, but not so like it's a million light years away and I can't reach it.
Yeah. I've just fallen into that trap so many times myself, where I make some sort of declaration that, I'm going to save the planet. I have this messiah complex. So I'm like, I'm going to save humankind. And I'm like, that's actually not that helpful. And then sometimes it's like, I'm going to try and floss regularly. And I'm like, that's probably good, but it's not really a worthy goal. It's more like a small habit. And so you're just prodding your worthy goal to kind of test that. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I want you to look at your first draft. You put it through these 3 different tests. I'm going to ask you in just a minute to write an active second draft. And you can see I'm forcing you to kind of work quickly on this. And I think sometimes there's a real power to working quickly, because it means you don't get bogged down and overthinking it. The reason a second draft is called active is because not only do I want you to take the learning from the test, whether it's FOSO or whether it's the Goldilocks zone or whether it's the spouse-ish one, but I want you to verb it. Meaning, I want you to start your worthy goal with a verb, a doing word. Now, I'm holding up to the screen a slide that has, 12 different verbs on it. Build, create, break, disrupt, start, change, stop, launch, ask for, reinvent, begin, challenge. But, there are a bazillion verbs. So there's a way for you to be thinking about what the right verb for you and your project. Here's why I'm asking you to kind of make this, to verb this. One of the traps you fall into with goals, this is one of the quirks of the human brain, is if we focused too much on the actual outcome, the actual moment of crossing the finish line, the success, that actually what happens is the brain goes, you've kind of visualized that so well that I don't even need to pursue it anymore, because actually your visualization feels like the same as actually achieving it. It's one of the ways that vision boards actually sometimes lessen people's ambition, because they're like, you look at the vision board and like, I've got all I need. rather than this is the gap between where I am now and what I'm hoping for. And that statement I started with, we unlock our greatness by working on the hard things. It's like, it's not by achieving the hard things. It's not by winning the prize. It's by working on the hard things. So starting with a verb also just brings us insight into saying it's in doing the work that the magic happens. It's in the starting it and getting it done and making progress that actually things unlock, ambitions appear, ambitions become achieved. And so part of why I'm asking you to verb it is to make sure this is an active worthy goal, not a passive statement of some outcome that you're hoping for. Ian's already led the way for us. He's actually started putting his active second draft in the chat to build understanding and a link between generations using documentary storytelling. That's great, Ian. I love that. I'm excited for you. How did you go, Chris? Am I asking you too soon, or have you got a kind of a tweak to your draft?
I have a small tweak, and I was using the Goldilocks thing to like make it more challenging but not so challenging. So my initial statement, I've modified one word to say teach introverts instead of just teach people. The people who are less likely to find their voice, who are going to hide and not realize who they are and realize their self-worth. So that's the one change I made.
What shifted in you when you changed that single word?
I just wanted to make it more difficult, because teaching people, it's very broad, and maybe they already love their voice and they're already speaking. So I'm less interested in helping those already achieve because they're so close already.
Right. What's the tagline on your email? Is it something like an introvert with a loud voice or something like that?
Mm-hmm. A loud introvert.
Yeah, loud introvert. So I love how this worthy goal actually has a connection to your sense of self and kind of a promise you already make into the world. So that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. And here's what's interesting. Ian's going, hey, introverts need you also. And what's powerful about Ian saying that is Chris can say, that's interesting, but that's not my worthy goal. Because if you're trying to say introverts need you as well, you're like, okay, well, that makes it important. So I'm going to add everybody to that, and that ups the important side of it. But it somehow lessens the thrilling side of it, because Chris just isn't as excited in serving extroverts, as he is in really connecting to his tribe, other introverts, and going, let me amplify that for you. So this is where you start feeling the pressure of the outside world and trying to keep expanding. And the power of keeping it tight really starts to land. Brian, build a new family legacy story that will strongly impact future generations as it's told. I love that. Mary-Ann, build a physical space, a pod placed in hospitals to help with physician burnout. Man, I love that. So that's helpful, Mary-Ann. I thought a pod was short for podcast. You're talking about a different thing, an actual physical space. So that's great. Vopa, helping people get unstuck through mentoring. That's great. That still feels pretty big. People is a big thing, but I feel like you're really on the good path. And we're only on the second draft. So in the last 5 minutes that we've got together, I want to take you to the edge of perhaps getting a third draft written. And we're going to apply one more test, and it's the voting test. Now, where I live in Canada, and where I've lived before, the US, and where I've lived before, the UK, and where I've lived before, Australia, one thing they all have in common is that they have a voting age of 18, an age of majority. And that's why I've called this next thing the voting test. I want you to look at your second draft, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to score it out of 7, my favorite score, against thrilling and important and daunting. So in other words, as you look at your draft as it is at the moment, on a score of 1 to 7, how thrilling is this for you? And remember, you're only doing this for you. You're not trying to get external validation. You don't care. It's like, be honest with yourself. How thrilling is that for you right now? And then do the same for important. On a scale of 1 to 7, how important does this feel? How connected is this to the bigger picture, to serving the world, to giving more to the world than you take? What score would you give yourself there? And then honestly, I mean, if you're really being honest with yourself, 1 to 7, how daunting does this feel for you? How much is this going to take you onto the edge of yourself, the edge of your competence and your confidence and your sense of self? how much is it going to give you that little bead of sweat in the back of the neck, which somebody mentioned early on? And here's what I want you to do. I'm going to make a request that you add up your three numbers, which so that you get a score out of 21. And if you're willing, in the chat, I'd love you to give yourself to share your total. It'll probably somewhere between 3 and 21, although some people come in with like 26 out of 21 because they're not that great at math. And that's fine. Some people are better at being creatives than they are at being mathematicians or accountants, and that's fantastic. But what we're doing here is you're really testing your worthy goal and the way you've drafted it to kind of go, well, where is it strong and where is it weak? And it's really interesting. I'm just looking at Chris's answers. He's got 7 for thrilling, 6 for important, 4 for daunting. So his total would be 17. And my hypothesis is that if your score isn't 18 or more, it isn't quite right. There's more work to be done to find the right balance, the right combination of thrilling, important, and daunting. And now you've got a clue where to look. And here's the other thing I'd say. Even if you're coming in at 21, I think there's more to be done. I think your draft can be tighter and more powerful. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set you up, and I think we've got time for this. Final draft is to claim your goal. And what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you add a single word to your current draft that might up the ante a little bit. And in some ways, here we're almost coming back to SMART goals because I'm getting you to be a bit more specific. And I think there are 5 main axes that you can think about where you might choose to add your single word or your single phrase. You might think about the commitment you're willing to make. In other words, how much time or energy and money you want to give to this. You might want to be more specific about the audience you serve or the geography that you're playing in. You might want to add something around the time by when you'll get this done, in the next quarter or within 9 months before you're dead in the next 2 decades. You might want to add the standard at which you're hoping to deliver this. Is it elite? Is it good enough? With my podcast, which I mentioned earlier on, the standard I set myself, which made all the difference, was to say I wanted it to be a top 3% podcast, meaning it has to have 10,000 downloads per episode within the first month. And that sets our standard for it, which makes a goal that wasn't daunting suddenly daunting for me. So I use that as my one. And maybe an outcome. Do you want it to be profitable? Do you want it to be sustainable? There are other words around each of those, but these give you a kind of a clue into this. And my invitation to you is to spend some time refining this work and polishing this work. Now, in the book, How to Begin, what we've done is we've done the first third of it, basically, because there are 3 sections to the book. One is how to draft a worthy goal. The second is how to commit and fully engage in that worthy goal. How do you know that this is really up for it? Are you really up for it? Or is this going to be another goal that you write out and then never get around to doing it? And then the third section of the book is how do you cross the threshold? How do you make small steps to make progress on this? And if you're looking for more information about this, howtobegin.com is the website where you'll find this. If you've listened to this before the book launches January the 11th, there's kind of bonuses and stuff for the book. And after January 11th, there's all sorts of resources that you can get that support the book as well. I'm sorry we didn't get to share the final draft. I know I rushed it a bit. I ran out of time. But let me ask you this. In the chat, what was most useful or most valuable for you out of all the stuff that we covered? Because we covered a lot in this hour together. And while you're reflecting on that and capturing that and putting that into the chat, Chris, can I ask you, first of all, what was most useful? And then secondly, what needs to be said to finish on a high and close this off?
Thank you so much. What was most useful for me was this rapid prototyping and letting go of perfection, and you escalating each time. Add this one variable, consider this, and I have now rewritten mine so that I think I can score 18 or higher. And so here goes. Teach introverts how to find their voice and tell powerful stories at TEDx. So adding a very specific thing because not everyone can speak at TEDx. Yeah. So that's a big bar. Now I think I move into the daunting area where I need to be.
Ooh. I got little shivers there. I totally felt that. Yeah, that really landed. I heard that. That's great, Chris.
Well, thank you, Michael. And so how do we begin? You know what I want to do with the people, the community? I want you to hang out after Michael leaves. I know he has to run. He has other commitments. And Michael, I truly appreciate you, as always, for sharing your valuable time, resources, and just the way you communicate in such a human level to make lofty ideas very attainable for all of us. And I just heartfelt thank you for doing this with us.
Chris, thank you. I love the support and encouragement I get from you. I love the design framing that you put to my work, because I aspire to that. So it makes me feel great to be recognized you and be seen by you. So thank you to you, Chris, and your team, and to all of you here. I really appreciate your time. Sorry I can't linger, but thanks for your time and being with me today. It's been wonderful to work with you all.
Thank you, Michael.
See you all.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
Thank you. See ya. You guys are lovely. Appreciate it. You're awesome. You're doing great. Bye then.
Here's what I want to do with you. I'm curious if you want to share your worthy goal. If you scored 18 or higher and you're ready to share it with the world, what I want you to do is just go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll just take you in order. And we're just going to just say your goal. We're not going to talk about it. We're just going to go down the line. All right? So I'll give it a beat. Everybody go ahead and raise your hand. And if you're not ready, that's okay. There's no pressure here. Don't feel like you have to. But I would love to hear your goals. There's something about speaking and articulating your goals that help you to manifest it into reality. And I love that part. So everybody who's ready, go ahead and write it. And even if you're not ready and you want to share, that's okay too. Just let us know that there's some work to be done. Okay. All right, here we go. So Vapa, you're up first.
The big goal is to shift from being a designer or doing execution in 2022 to being full-time mentor, to helping those that feel like they're underdogs and helping them get unstuck.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. All right. All right. Morgan, how you doing, Morgan? You're up next.
I'm amazing. So my goal is to build a community of fine artists that create posters as an art form.
All right. Posters. I love that. Okay. Serena, you're up next.
So I want to reinvent the business ecosystem so that it uses a triple bottom line, which is people, planet, and profit. So basically turn all business into B Corps is the short version.
Okay. I like that. All right. That is a big goal, by the way, though. Next up is Greg. Create Greg. What you got for us?
Still under 18, but will sound, create films that tell stories of people to inspire others, as I was inspired watching Pursuit of Happiness.
Ooh. Okay. I like that little twist at the end there. That was a very touching movie, by the way. All right, so let's keep working on it, because you're like, you need to get above 18, right? I like how no matter what Michael said, he's like, I don't care if you score 21, you can still push. And I like that there's a little room to do more. I like that. Okay, wonderful, beautiful. Thank you. Richard, you're up.
Right on, thank you. I have to build a YouTube channel to share my workshop recordings every week in 2022 so that on-the-fence creatives will be inspired to pursue facilitating their own workshops.
Okay, so my question for you is, you want to do that for the sake of what?
To get other creative people to start pursuing workshops as opposed to being order takers, but being more strategic and asking questions and holding group meetings with clients.
Okay. Is that because you want to empower creatives?
Yeah, I want them to get what they deserve and get paid better and just move up the food chain essentially and be more of a partner than an order taker.
Okay, hold on. So you want to help creatives move up the food chain.
Yes.
That's is much more succinct there. And it's a visual thing and I can get it. And if I identify as a creative and I want to move up the food chain, and I don't know what creative doesn't want to move up the food chain, that is super clear to me. Just throwing that out there. Okay, Richard?
I just wrote it down.
Okay. You know, what I thought was kind of cool was we go from big and broad, and then we're starting to figure out how to say these things in a really hooky way. And if you can do that, those things are, like, repeat in people's minds, and they're able to repeat that story. So complexity fights against that. So whenever you can, try to reduce your ideas, your words, your headline to the fewest number of words, because that makes it more memorable and more impactful. All right. So now let's move over to Nino. Nino, go ahead.
So stamp comics as a leading form of business communications by helping businesses tell their stories. Yeah,
I think the essence of the meaning is still there. So we're going to do this again. Do you know the Pareto principle? The Pareto principle? It's
I'm not familiar with that.
I think it's an Italian mathematician. It's like the 80-20 rule, which you may have heard of, which is 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your efforts. 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your clients, etc. So I think it was in the one thing, he's like, use the Pareto principle on itself. So the 80-20 rule becomes like, what is 20, like 80% or 20% of 20, and then it's 5. And then you just keep doing that until you get to the 1. So keep trying to cut out words and see if you can get to the essence. And I think you'll get there. You're just gonna, my analogy is you just boil it down. It's a reduction, and then you make this super short, potent thing. And the challenge is, can you say it in 5 words or less? 5 words or less, and see what happens, okay? There was a Clubhouse room that says, give us your TED Talk in 5 words. And it really makes you think, like, what is important to me and what is the big idea? Should we try that, everybody? You want to try it? All right, everybody give it a try. Reduce it down to 5 words. You'll be shocked. And it'll make you much more careful and selective as the words you choose. All right, Vapa, go ahead. Give us your 5 words.
I'm going to do it in 4.
Name that tune in 4. I love it.
help underdogs get unstuck.
Help underdogs get unstuck. Dude, you did it. Help underdogs get unstuck. You know what? All respect to Michael. I'm taking over, guys. I'm writing a new book. Tell me your whole life in 5 words. That's it. Help underdogs get unstuck. Beautiful. Look at that. Oh, so good. Okay, let me lower your hand. Serena, you're up next.
Redesign brands as truly sustainable.
Redesign brands as truly sustainable. Oh my God, that's the idea. That's no people, profit, planet, sustainability. Look at that. You did it. Let's move on to Richard. Richard, what are your 5 words?
Help creatives become cherished partners.
Ooh, help creatives become cherished partners. I like that. All right. Okay, very good. Let me lower your hand. Kia, you're up.
Teaching good food craft.
Teaching good food craft. There you go. Here's what I want you all to do. You can take those 5 words and you can keep rewriting it and come up with 10 ways of saying the same 5 things. Try moving the verbs around. Try to have some alliteration, or as Paul McCartney, it don't sing good. You got to say it out loud and make sure it flows inside your mouth, okay? Some words have higher musicality qualities to them. If you haven't done so, if you're a fan or not a fan of the Beatles, it's remarkable to see geniuses at work and how he just humming words. And he goes, yeah, I know that makes more sense, but it don't sing good. And it has to sing good. And I know that's not proper English, but he's just saying something, like he's expressing himself as some kind of musical savant. It's got to come out. So everybody, as you say this, like when people are like, so what do you do? I blah, 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 blah. And it has to sound really nice. And you can see him rewrite the words to get back. And he's like, Tucson, Arizona. And that's when John Lennon's like, is Tucson in Arizona? They all sit there and look like, yes, but Tucson, Arizona, it sounds good. That's what you need to do, okay? So we want clarity first, and then we want a rhythm or a musicality to it second. So write as many as you can, different 5-word combinations until you get there. The thesaurus is your friend. English-speaking people, first native language, they're your friend too. Run it by them. They'll help you shape it. They might find a more interesting word for you, and then you're going to have something. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.